Krishna, everyone. Welcome back again to our ongoing series on the glories of our beloved Sri Vrindavan Dham. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nivisheshu Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarane. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So we are continuing with our series on springtime in Vrindavan. In our last lecture, we told a pastime of Holi, the festival of colors, and mentioned that it is one of the main pastimes that take place in Vrindavan spring. In fact, it doesn't happen at any other time of the year. However, there are numerous celebrations of Holi during Vrindavan spring in different parts of Braja, and involving different groups and different personalities, which we'll discuss today. And like all pastimes in Vrindavan, the performance of Holi is an eternal pastime, yet it has its origins as well. It has its first time. Surprisingly, during the pastimes of Lord Nrsingadev. It's really interesting. We'll discuss that. But how to understand something is eternal but has an origin? Well, a very simple analogy is the moon. We're all aware that, of the moon's existence. No one thinks there's no moon. But nevertheless, it makes a fresh appearance each night. And there's a nice verse to this effect in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 3, verse number 8. And I'll quote here. Then the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu, who is eternally situated in the core of everyone's heart, appeared from the heart of Devaki in the dense darkness of night, like the full moon rising on the eastern horizon, because Devaki was of the same category as Krishna. Unquote. So now how does the origin of the Holi festival fit into the pastimes of Lord Nrsingadev? Well, we described this nearly 2 years ago, so we'll just summarize it here. As we all know, in Satya Yuga, Hiranyakashipu was the king of demons, and he spent most of his time, terrorizing the devotees of the Lord. Unfortunately, or fortunately for him, his own son, Prahlad Maharaj, was the greatest of the suras, or the devotees of the Lord. As a result, Hiranyakashipu tried to kill Prahlad Maharaj in so many ways. But being unsuccessful in every way that he tried, he finally turned to his sister. Hiranyakashipu had a sister, whose name was Holika, to help him kill Prahlad. Now, Holika had a blessing from Lord Brahma that she could never be burned by fire. This was the blessing of Brahma. She could never be burned by fire. So, as a last resort, Hiranyakashipu ordered his sister to kill Prahlad by sitting in the center of a huge bonfire with Prahlad on her lap, so the fire would devour him, not her. However, as we all know, Prahlad Maharaj survived the fire because he was fully protected by Krishna. Whereas Holika perished in the fire. How is that? The acharyas say that because her boon, her blessing from Lord Brahma, was annulled, it was cancelled, because of her offense to a pure devotee of the Lord, Prahlad Maharaj. That's how serious it is to blaspheme or criticize a devotee of the Lord. Her boon was just cancelled. She had, you could say, the greatest asset life can provide, the association of a saintly devotee. But instead of using it, she abused it. Sri Narayan Pandit says in Hitopadesh, verses 146 and 147, Shamshara Visha Vrikshasya Dve Rashavat Pale Yav Yamurita Rashavada Sa Gamasa Janai Shaha. This is the first verse. The poisonous tree of the material world yields only two succulent fruits: nectarian literature and saintly association. So beautiful. Then he says, Satsanga Keshava Bhaktir Gangam Bashi Nimarjanam Ashare Kalu Shamshara Trini Sharni Bhavayat. Quote, in this useless world, there are only three valuable things: saintly association, devotion to Krishna, and bathing in the Ganga. Yeah. So saintly association is so important. If we can take advantage of it, we can perfect our life. And if we abuse that association, if we're offensive to the saintly persons, our destination is the lower planets. So ultimately, Holi is celebrated to commemorate the death of the evil Holika. That's Holi is, it's called Holi to commemorate the death of Holika. And also for Prahlad, to glorify his devotion and his faith in Lord Vishnu and Krishna. That's the higher principle. Holi is celebrated as a recognition of Prahlad's deep faith, one of the 12 Mahajans. So different reasons that we celebrate Holi. Now, as we mentioned in a previous lecture, the Brajabasis, they celebrate the Holi festival from Vashanta Panchami, the first day of spring. Actually, I'm speaking today on the first day of spring in Orissa, until a few days after Falguna Purnima. And during that particular period of which Holi is celebrated, Krishna and Balaram are given leave from cow herding. I thought that was really interesting when I read that. Krishna and Balaram are given leave. You don't have to herd the cows, just play Holi. Also, Holi is played on various days in various towns. For example, in Varshana, Holi, Varshana, where Srimati Radharani lives, Holi is played on the 9th day from the full moon. Then Holi is played at Nandagram, where Krishna lives, on the 10th day of the full moon, from the full moon. And in Vrindavan proper, Holi is celebrated on the 11th to the 15th days from the full moon. Nice transcendental facts. And I was reading that during the Holi festival season, the children of Braja are allowed to play Holi in the forest every day, but they can only play in the towns and villages on scheduled days. Interesting. During the Holi festival season, the children of Braj, they're allowed to play Holi in any forest every day, but they could only play Holi in towns and villages on scheduled days. And that's when the adults join in the fun. So, one spring, the Brajabasis made plans for a particularly grand festival of Holi. And this, of course, meant it required lots of colored dyes and colored powders and colored liquids, etc. So the gopis started collecting all of this. So where did they get all this colored dye and colored liquids? You see the pictures, there's so much being thrown. Where did they get it all? It's very interesting. The Shastras describe they collected these items from three sources. From their parents, from Vrindadevi's storehouses. We spoke on that many months ago. She has storehouses around Braj for various purposes. And the third place they got all the paraphernalia for Holi was from the desire trees of Vrindavan. Wow. So as all of this was going on, the gopis were getting ready to play Holi. The cowherd boys, they had a meeting where they hatched a plan to attack the gopis with colors first. Now, their plan was that Madhamangal would very calmly approach the girls and ask for a sweet. They were used to that. just kind of casually approached them and asked for a sweet, kind of to put them off guard. And when that time came, he walked up to them and said, "Dear girls, you are all Vaishyas, and you now have a very distinguished Brahmana in your midst. So you should all get very busy and prepare some sweets for me." Trying to put them off guard, they didn't know the boys were going to come. But Lalita interrupted him and said, "You rascal Madhu Mangal, we know what you boys are planning." And she turned to all the gopis and said, "Get him, girls." The boys had a different plan, but the girls, they had a better plan. "Get him, girls." So the girls, as we were discussing, they were ready and armed with, huge, it's described, huge pots of red and purple dyes, red and purple. So all these gopis, they ran forward and they poured those huge, it's described, huge vats of dye all over Madhu Mangal, the cowherd boy. And it was only with great difficulty that Madhu Mangal managed to call out, "Oh Krishna, save me! I have been captured. I am now blinded by fragrant powders and dyes, and I cannot escape from these shameless girls. Krishna, help!" So, Krishna was some distance away, but hearing him, Krishna turned to the cowherd boys, and he pointed in that direction, and he said, "Charge!" It's a famous pastime in Vrindavan. "Charge!" So the cowherd boys, with their own dyes and liquids and sprays and powders, started running towards the gopis. And it's described very, very soon there were two great armies facing each other. Thousands of cowherd boys and thousands of cowherd girls. And with the sounds of bugles and horns, sounding, bugles and horns were sounded, both sides started shooting dyes with their syringes and throwing colored powders. It's mentioned that streams of colored liquids filled the air, coloring the land, the sky, and the waters of Braj. And then there's a fine line there, as well as all the gopas and the gopis too. Everything got covered. And after everyone had used all their liquid dyes, because they started with these syringes, you see sometimes in the Pichwai paintings from Rajasthan, there's syringes. At that point, Plan B came in. They started throwing this powdered dye, which we mentioned the other day is a fragrance, actually. Each dye has a particular color, the real Holi, the original Holi. So it's mentioned that very soon, everyone had created this huge cloud of colored dust that blocked the rays of the sun, similar to a pastime we told in our last lecture. And as a result, everyone got confused and started throwing the powders not only on the enemy, but also on their friends, so much they couldn't see. So, inflicting the powders on their friends. Friendly fire, we call that in the military. So, what happened is that it's such a joyful, loving pastime that everyone got intoxicated by the bliss. And they began calling out, as we hear in Holi in Vrindavan. I've been on there on a number of occasions. You hear the people, they call out, "Ho, ho, Holi! Ho, ho, Holi!" And finally, in the midst of this transcendental chaos, Madhu Mangal stood up. And he said, "Krishna, your Vamsi, your Vamsi, your flute, your flute." So although Krishna couldn't see even an inch in front of him, he managed to pull his flute out from his belt, where he keeps it, and place it to his lips. And as soon as he blew into it, this huge cloud of powders settled, and everyone could see each other. And Krishna said, "Shanti, Shanti, Shanti." Now, that's fine. But by clearing the air, he made himself an open target for Sri Radha. So she signaled to the gopis, and she said, "Girls, surround him, get him. Girls surround him, get him. So suddenly, all those thousands, actually I was reading tens of thousands of gopis, surrounded Krishna and covered him from head to foot with streams of sandalwood scented water and a variety of colors. Streams of sandalwood scented water and a variety of colors. So the acharyas describe that this battle between the gopas and the gopis, between the cowherd boys and the girls, they described it as a fierce exchange of love and a colorful way to show affection and receive affection. Because Vrindavan's all about love. There's some complicated pastimes and there's intrigue, but it's all meant to accent the loving exchanges between the devotees and Radha and Krsna and the devotees. Love reigns supreme in Vrindavan, in the spiritual world. So after enjoying in this way for some time, the gopas and the gopis headed to different parts of the Jamuna to bathe. And as they did so, the dye from their bodies swirled in assorted colors in Jamuna's waters, making it look like a moving rainbow. This is a detail I think we mentioned in another lecture as well. It was so beautiful. As they were taking bath, the dye from their bodies swirled in assorted colors in Yamuna's waters, making it look like a moving rainbow. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki. And on yet another occasion, while playing Holi during spring, the gopis on one side were evenly matched by gopas on the other. Again, it's kind of a battle. They line up like that. And they were pretty, the number was pretty equal. And as a result, it's mentioned, neither side could gain a decisive victory over their opponents. And eventually, Vrindavaneshwari, Srimati Radharani, she became fatigued from overexertion. And she sat down on a golden throne. And it's written that soon after a breathless Krishna soon joined her, and together they rooted for their respective followers. They're sitting on this golden throne, right? And Krishna's rooting for the boys, and Radha's cheering on the girls. So that really inspired the gopas and the gopis, and they, really got into throwing big balls of red powder. It's mentioned that either exploded on their targets or burst in the air before getting there. And as a result, all this colored dye, it settled on the trees and the vines and the grass, as well as on the faces and the limbs and the clothes of all the combatants. That's how it's described. And Madhavangal, that funny little cowherd boy, he would run to the front lines and incite the girls by dancing around. And when the gopis charged, throwing these balls of powder or squirting liquid color, he would retreat to hide behind the boys. Fun and games, but on the transcendental platform. The playground of God. Vrindavan is the playground of God. So it's described. It's described that most of the children threw colors, but some played instruments. It's described like that. Most of the children threw colors, but some played instruments, and others sang. It's in your mind's eye, you can see this big battle going on. Some boys and some girls are, egging it on by, playing instruments or singing. And I was also reading that excited birds, like the peacocks and the cuckoos, they would then add their calls to the music, while circling above the battlefield, intoxicated by the fun. So interesting. So eventually, some gopis decided to play a trick on Radha and Krsna. And they're sitting on the throne, right? So these cowherd boys and cowherd girls, actually the cowherd Gopis, yeah, sorry, no boys. Some of the gopis decided to play a trick on Radha and Krishna. And approaching them from behind, the girls tied the divine couple's outer garments together, like in a knot. And then from the front, both the boys and the girls suddenly attacked the divine couple, dousing them so completely with colored powders that the acharyas say they look like two vermilion Hanuman deities. You know, Hanuman's covered with that. They put a dye on him, actually, an orange dye on him. The murtis here, the deities. So this was a vermilion color. So the divine couple had so much of this powder on, they looked like two vermilion Hanuman deities. So naturally, Radha and Krishna, they tried to escape this surprise attack, but when they tried to flee, they were restrained by the knot. Their cloth was tied together in a knot. Thus, they couldn't avoid being pelted by the colorful dyes of Holi. And it's mentioned, humiliated, they ran together for shelter in a particular kunj, in a particular grove. And there, Krishna was able to use, it's described, the pointed end of his syringe to untie the knot. So then both he and Srimati Radharani, they returned to the golden throne they were previously sitting on. And as they did so, the whole holy battle, it subsided. And then once again, this time with the divine couple's acknowledgement, their clothes were knotted again, a playful pastime, as the cowherd boys and girls sang wedding songs to them. It's a play pastime. And Radha and Krishna, they got a little embarrassed. They actually got flustered by these new developments. So they rose from their places, but were unable to part ways. They wanted to be together. So once the fun had subsided, Radha and Krishna spent some time together. And once all the fun had subsided, Krishna sent the boys home. And he and the gopis, they bathed in a nearby lake called Gulal Kund. It means the lake of colored dye. They bathed there in the lake of colored dye, and which washed the color from their transcendental bodies, from Radha and Krishna. And then again they were dressed in fresh clothes and ornaments. And I was reading that it said that even today, sometimes during the spring season, colored dyes become visible in the waters of the Jamuna there, where there's a lake connected to the Jamuna. Colored dyes become visible in that lake attached to the Jamuna, and one can hear sounds of unseen children playing Holi. This permeates the air. You can hear the children playing, and sometimes you can look around, and the trees are dusted with colored powders. So one day we can all go to Gulal Kund, the lake of colored dye, where the divine couple, Radha and Krishna, bathed and then dressed, and maybe we'll be fortunate during the spring season to see the colored dyes become visible in the waters of that lake, and we can hear the sounds of unseen children playing Holi. That sound will permeate the air, and we'll look around, and the trees will be dusted with colored powders. It's all possible by Prabhupada's mercy. Just like Krishna said to Arjuna, now I give you divine eyes by which you can see this universal form. So our progress in Krishna consciousness, our residence in Vrindavan, our ability to one day see the divine couple, to see Krishna Balaram, to see the original Kalpavriksha trees, the Jamuna, the Giriraj, that will come from Krishna's representative, Srila Prabhupada. So we can pray to him like that we can one day see this eternal festival of Holi being played in eternal Vrindavan. Jai. So I think we have enough material for maybe 2 more classes on spring. So sweet. thank you so much for this opportunity. We'll be back in a couple of days. Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki, Shri Shri Krishna Balaram ki, Shri Shri Radha Sundar ki, Vrindavaneshwari Shrimati Radharani ki, Shri Mayapur Dham ki, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki, Jagannath Puri Dham ki, I'm close to Jagannath Puri Dham now, Shri Krishna Sankirtan Yagya ki, Gaura Premanandi, Jai Jai Sri Sri Radhe Sham.